Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is the Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel, welcome to Total War Warhammer. So the first patch came through, I'm just going to give you my first impressions of what I think about it. Haven't played with it too much, although I have played a little bit with it. Now, first of all, let's go through the rosters. Bretonnia got some minor tweaks and changes. King Lone Leoncourt got a few minor buffs to him, in particular Beaquist. Any unit as well that has this regeneration type ability, not just the Ladies Champion, but there are other equivalents like the Vampire Counts version of it, for example. That has been increased in its effectiveness by a small amount across the board, so all of them still have the same value of regeneration. It's just that that value is a little bit higher. All of the general abilities have been tweaked a little bit. Less stats are given. As you can see here, you only get the charge bonus and armor piercing damage. I believe this one used to give you also melee attack, and Foe Seeker gave you, I believe, another bonus as well that I can't remember. The duration has increased for all of these as well, though, as has the cooldown for some of them. Deadly Onslaught now has a 90-second cooldown instead of 45. Duration has increased across the board for those. Stand Your Ground lost its melee attack and the equivalent of Stand Your Ground. There are plenty of variants of that. They all work the same now. Plus 16 leadership, plus 36 melee defense. 14 seconds now instead of 11. Otherwise, Spearmen Arms and Men at Arms got tweaked slightly, minus 10 to their armor. Grail Knights got some minor boosts to their statistics, and their weapon strength got fiddled around, giving them more armor-piercing damage but less normal weapon damage. Overall, their weapon damage remained exactly the same. So minor tweaks to the Bretonians, nothing too substantial there. Very minor tweaks to the Dwarves. Their Flame Cannon and Organ Gun got slight increases there. Flame Cannon got a little bit of extra range, only 10 points. Their missile damage is also a little bit higher. Trollhammer Torpedoes got a decent boost to their missile damage, but nothing that's going to make them super viable right now. Nothing else really changed other than the Miners' Blasting Charges got nerfed in damage by quite a bit, while the Iron Breakers still have the same missile damage on theirs. Greenskins have some nerfs to their Savage Orcs, all three variants of it, and maybe even the Savage Orc Arrow Boys. I didn't really remember to check those, but their Goblin Big Boss now has some slightly higher statistics and also has a 500 point cost, putting him much, much cheaper than any other hero in the game, and actually quite a good value in my opinion. So, the Savage Orcs are still pretty good in my opinion. Their statistics are still quite good at just a shock single charge, but they're no longer much better than things like Orc Boys. They're no longer really dominating compared to those other options, so I think you'll still see them kicking around quite often. There was supposed to be a change to the Goblin Archers and other variants of Goblin Archers, but I don't notice any changes to them as far as I can tell. So that's going to be an interesting thing if that actually has changed. Trolls have had their hitbox decreased in size, so they're a little bit harder to hit with missiles. Theoretically, their weapon strength increased, but I don't actually remember what it used to be. I don't actually think 86 is higher than it used to be, but maybe it is. Still nothing fantastic, still not a unit that I really think is a great one, but it's still got its uses as a line breaker from time to time. The Empire has had a few changes to, for example, the Witch Hunter. Now, this is a good time to mention that a lot of magic has had slight tweaks to it, and this is primarily to direct damage spells like Fate of Bajuna. Spirit Leech Accusation has also been changed because of this. So that's going to be an interesting thing to see if that causes them to stick around, or if you're going to see people taking far, far fewer of the Witch Hunters. Now, Stand Your Ground, or Hold Your Line rather, has remained the same despite the other changes to general abilities, so the unique Empire one hasn't really shifted at all. Everything around here has stayed basically the same. Demigryphs and their cavalry in general has changed quite a bit. Empire Knights theoretically got a boost to charge bonus, as has the Reichsguard. I don't really see them having very statistically huge charge bonuses though, so they may not have actually changed all that much for all I can tell. Demigryph Knights and Demigryph Knights with Halberds have had their statistics tweaked, lowered across the board. Armor, speed, weapon strength have all been reduced, charge bonus has been reduced, and they've been increased by 100 points. So they're still quite strong though. I think that the numbers of tweaks were very, very mild, so you don't see too dramatic a swing in their performance. I think that these incremental changes are quite good. I would like to see them continue making very minor tweaks at a time, continue tweaking until it gets to the right point that they feel they're comfortable with, rather than big sweeping changes, because that could really nerf or damage the game in a profound way. Vampire counts have received some major changes. Invocation of Nihek, for reasons unexplained, is twice as effective as it used to be, which I'm not sure I agree with, but that is the way it is. It's going to be a very, very scary, very effective spell for the Necromancer types to be doing, so expect to see a little bit more of those. The Karen Wraiths have had their physical resistance increased to 80%, and their stats have been slightly tweaked. In particular, their leadership is 6 lower than it used to be, which is quite substantial. It makes it much, much easier to forcibly crumble them. The rest of their roster has had the Blood Knights added to them. I believe that Black Knights have had a charge bonus increased as well, but not enough for me to really notice. That was simply something in the patch notes. Now, Blood Knights are an interesting unit. They actually have very, very poor statistics for a 1,700 point unit, but they've got resistance to missile attacks and they've got frenzy. Both of those are fairly good attributes. They've got high armor, they've got decent leadership for an undead unit, and they've got a bonus versus large, giving them a role that is really lacking in the Vampire Council list, and I think this is going to be something that shakes things up a little bit in that sense, because previously I could just take like 2 giants and they would wreck pretty much the entire army by themselves. I've seen people take like just entire giant-based armies and defeat entire Vampire Counts armies by themselves consistently, no matter what the composition of the vampires was. So it's going to be interesting to see how that changes things, how that shakes things up a little bit. So I don't think these things trade necessarily that efficiently against things like giants, but it is an option that you can use if you've bogged down the giant. You can charge it with the Blood Knights, and they'll do really good damage to it quite quickly. I don't know how well they would do against something like the Spider, though, because the Spider has good armor, meaning that these guys' lack of armor penetrating damage is not going to go over too well. Next up, Crypt Horrors have received a general nerf. In particular, 10 armors have been stripped off of them, and I believe their weapon strength has been dropped by like 13 or something around that. So fairly substantial damage nerf to this, fairly substantial durability nerf to them. So they're going to go down a lot more easily, but they're still a very, very good unit, still very powerful. I think that they're still going to see play, but they're just not going to be able to dominate. If you take in a line of 8 units of these, you can't expect to win just based off that. Warriors of Chaos have received some of the most sweeping changes. Their general has been much more standardized. He's got the same abilities no matter what you put him on now, as opposed to before, where if you put him on a flying mount, he lost all of his general abilities for some reason, reasons unknown. And the Chaos Dragon has received general buffs to all of his statistics there. So this is no longer a huge penalty to take, which is a good change in my opinion. Their different heroes have been a bit more standardized. The Chaos Sorcerer of Death has been reduced in price by 200. Part of this is because Fate of Bajuna and Spirit Leech have been significantly nerfed. I think that the Sorcerer Lords have also received some slight bonuses to their melee statistics, but I cannot remember for sure what they were before. Excuse me. Because I didn't take them for that purpose. Sorry about that whole dying thing. I didn't take them for their ability to bring flame weapons or melee weapons or whatever like that. So the fact that the Sorcerer Lords are a little bit better in melee combat doesn't really make a huge difference to me. For infantry, Forsaken have received a plethora of nerfs. For example, their weapon strength is down 6, their melee attack is down 8, their armor is down 10. So these guys got dramatically sacked with the nerf hammer. I don't really know why. They were one of the few things keeping together the Chaos roster. Chaos Warriors and all 3 varieties have remained the same. Chosen have gotten 5 more armor. Chosen with Halberds have received a +3 bonus versus large to their already fairly okay bonus versus large, but nothing substantial there. All 3 of these tiers I feel are a little bit overpriced. And remain so. Chaos Chariot has been reduced in price by 50 points. It's still not particularly great. Gorebeast Chariot I think has actually been pretty good to me. I've taken a couple games and it is just really, really good at wrecking heavily armored units and then getting sort of back out of there. Chaos Knights and Chaos Knights Lances theoretically got a bit of a boost. I believe it was mostly to their charge values. Don't see them as being super cost effective still despite that. Marauders of both sorts have received some minor buffs and adjustments. In particular, they've apparently been given an accuracy boost, making them a little bit more reliable against things like gyrocopters, for example, that are flying around, maybe. Hopefully that's the case. Their trolls also got tweaked, and their Chaos Spawn also have smaller hitboxes. Dragon Ogres theoretically received a buff, but I don't remember what their numbers were well enough because I didn't take them. I still don't think that these numbers are anything to write home about. Still wouldn't take them. Hell Cannon has received some tweaks to the way that its targeting works, and supposedly makes it a little bit more reliable. Alright, so that's pretty much the changes. What are my first thoughts about them after having gone through it pretty quickly? These are very minor changes. I don't think it's going to shake things up too much, although it patches out a little bit of the most egregious cheese out there. It means that the way that they've changed things like Spirit Leech got nerfed, for example. people are still going to be able to kill your general with Spirit Leech. People are still going to use that for that purpose. I think that one of the benefits to this change, though, is that your general will be in the fight longer. It'll cost him more mana that he could potentially have used for other things as well. So if he really wants to dedicate his Lore of Death wizard to assassinating your general, he still can. That's what the role of that spell is supposed to be, is picking off key targets. But it's going to take longer, it's going to cost more mana, and by then maybe you've lost the fight a little bit too much. So there's definitely sort of downsides to it. So we'll have to see how that sort of pans out. The unit tweaks and changes, I think I agree with some. I don't agree necessarily with all of them. I do think that the Bretonnians needed that 10 armor because their units were very, very poor morale, so they had to be able to win the fights to be competitive. And if anything even remotely wrong happened, they always instantly routed. This isn't the case with like the Imperial versions of it, where they would not necessarily be winning the fight, but they would almost guaranteed be sticking it around for a very, very long time. So you know, it encouraged that sort of combined arms. Combined arms doesn't really work as well with the Bretonnians because they don't have as many different unit options that are viable right now compared to them. Alright, so we're up against Lord Putin. I'm going to try Vampire Counts because I feel like they've changed the most. I'm going to go ahead and pick Manfred here. And we'll take a Necromancer that's been in vogue lately. Our opponent has chosen the Empire, so we're going to go ahead and take... let's go ahead and take some Blood Knights. I think that should be an interesting addition. Now, they're dramatically too expensive for what they do, I think. That's just my opinion. We're going to go ahead and pick 4 units of Graveguard with great weapons. We're going to have a couple of Skeleton Spearmen here. We're going to have a couple of regular Graveguard, perhaps. Actually, no, let's have a couple of... Let's drop 2 of these Graveguard with great weapons. Grab, like, 4 of these guys. And maybe take some Karen Wraiths. That might be an interesting addition. We're keeping Manfred on the ground for this one because I think that our opponent might just go air here. Yeah, why don't we take a Karen Wraith? I think that throwing an additional Karen Wraith against an opponent when they're sort of... like, Karen Wraith and Blood Knight might be a good combo. I don't really know for sure, though. This is looking a little bit too pricey here, but let's go ahead and strip down some of that. We'll take a good screen of zombies there. We'll take 3 of these guys. Or our friend is going to just leave the game. Either way. Alright, well, we'll see what happens. Alright, different guy. Gonna still pick Vampire Counts. I think that they've had, again, some of the more interesting changes, and I want to try out the new units, so... Obviously, we're going to do that. Alright, so we're up against, once again, Empire. You know what? Actually, let's not take the Necromancer. I don't think we're going to... Let's take 2 of them, 2 of them, 3 of them. And that's going to be sort of like an infantry line there. 3 of those guys. Let's take a couple of those guys. So I'm trying to figure out, like, because I do believe these guys lose to Demigryph Knights. I'm trying to figure out, like, how should I swing that fight in my favor there. We'll take a couple of these guys, I think, and buff up our number of zombies, maybe. I think that ought to do. Alright. So we got a lot more unit types than I really like having. Like, I don't actually like having a bunch of different types of units when I play this game. So my opponent has got a lot of anti-large, it looks like, and that his main line looks like it might be Halberdiers. They're going to actually be a little bit good because they're still armor-piercing, and I've taken a lot of Graveguard, which are armored. We'll have to see how that works out for us. I'm going to keep Manfred sort of center of our army here, and we're going to be using a mix of, depends on the targets that he gives us, but Fate of Bajuna, Invocation of Nihek, so on and so forth. Alright, so these Blood Knights are going to be tricky to use because our opponent has got Halberds, which are a good counter against Blood Knights. But we'll see how things go. I think that Blood Knights rely a little bit too much on the charge with their statistic line, but maybe not. We'll see. Lovely rainy sort of day here. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and get a sort of wave of zombies up front here. Your typical sort of chaff unit, sacrificial, absorb missile kind of thing. We'll have skeletons on either flank. Use them as sort of assistance for our cavalry if we get into a cavalry fight. Graveguard with great weapons. I think I'm going to put like this. Hex Wraiths are pretty fast, or Karen Wraiths are pretty fast, so I'm going to put them sort of central and have them move around as necessary. We're going to have our Blood Knights on the flanks, supported by those skeleton spearmen. Alright. Now, I don't actually like this setup. The reason is I don't actually like the Blood Knights, but I wanted to give them a try. The reason I don't like them is I think that they don't do quite what they're supposed to do cost-effectively enough. For example, I don't believe that they would be a cost-effective solution against a giant, which is something that, you know, they needed the bonus versus large for. I don't think that they work well against other cavalry because they don't have the anti-armor trait like other good units of cavalry do, like the Demigryph Knights, for example, or the higher armor-piercing damage that Grail Knights have now. And their statistics are relatively weak for their cost, so it's going to be interesting seeing how they play out, whether or not they turn out to be any good. And at their cost as well, they're really, really susceptible to things like Fate of Vajuna, or the Rune of Wrath and Ruin, or, you know, magic missiles. Like if they get hit with a fireball and it takes out 4 of them, that's going to be really, really bad for them. If they get hit by a cannonball, it's going to wipe out a lot of points worth of stuff. So it's going to be interesting seeing how they cope with all that. Alright, looks like my opponent is taking a fairly large lineup of units here. It's going to be pretty hard for him to deal with the Graveguard, actually. They're a pretty good counter against these types of units. Sort of a wad of crossbowmen back here, protected by other things. Flanks guarded, I think, by halberdiers on both sides. That's going to be hard for me to deal with, because I don't have a great unit for dealing with that. The Blood Knights, as good as they are not good for dealing with halberdiers, of course. Now I could sweep really wide around him, and that might work. But we'll have to see how things go. I'm going to use a move order like this here. Now what's going to happen at the last second is I'm going to peel my zombies off to the flanks and have them try and tie down these halberds. I do want the Graveguard to get into combat in his center here. Alright, let's get our other Graveguard over here. These Graveguard can fight over here. But start getting these zombies peeled off to the flanks here. Oh, there's some Demigryphs over there. Let's get these zombies around to the flanks. There's more Demigryphs around our sides there. Hex Wraiths, I am going to want around. Alright, so let's bring our Hex Wraiths and those sort of units over to here. Let's just tie up these halberdiers with those units. Now I could double team all of my units together into... It's charging the wrong unit with that unit of Demigryph Knights. Let's charge these guys into here. I'm actually going to Purple Sun. Charge these guys into there. Let's get ready to charge these guys into there. That Purple Sun did nothing. Fantastic. Alright, we've managed to use Fate of Vajuna on the right unit there. I'm going to try and get my general out of here as well. Alright. Let's have you guys turn and fight them. Units on the flanks are crumbling, but that's because we're fighting with, you know, using zombies against anything, really. These guys getting caught up, and because of that sort of mass that I've got, they're going to do a good job at fighting here. Alright, so I've managed to get a good resurrection spell off, Invocation of Nihek off on my general here. The net of Amentot over here, which is going to be unfortunate, but let's go ahead and just use another one of these against him. Just keep my unit alive. These halberds are doing a fantastic enough job, but I've sort of gotten around behind my opponent here, so that's going to really just suck for him. That shot went through my Graveguard, which is actually pretty deadly. Like, my Graveguard are a very important unit for me, so losing them would be bad, but at the same time, I can afford to, kind of. Alright, let's get these units back into the fray over this way. Our Blood Knights have done a good job of killing the Witch Hunter. Actually, Netta Amantok got buffed, so it lasts a lot longer. Alright, so this guy's shattered now, so these Blood Knights can get around the back. Blood Knights over here, I'm going to have them continue chasing down those Demigryph Knights, just because I don't want them rallying. Our general is doing pretty well, actually, right now. He's not being harassed by anything, he's not being shot. They focused a lot of energy on him, so the fact that I had to use 2 solo target spells with him doesn't really bother me that much. Alright. So we're gonna get our charge blunted by these archers here, these crossbowmen. In fact, I'm gonna get a very poor charge off there, but that's okay. Alright, so their general has decided to try and hunt down my general. It's not going to go all that well for him. If he gets a couple lucky hits in, I'm just going to use the Invocation, and I'm sort of swarming his unit as well. These Spearmen with Shields are going to lose against the stuff that they're fighting against. These Demigryph Knights got wrecked by these guys over here. Going to try and continue on this fight as it is. He's still tied down over here, but this Halberdier unit has in fact beaten both of my units of zombies. These units of zombies have done a fantastic job, however, so let's go ahead and bring them around. Alright, let's get you guys into the fight. You can fight that Bright Wizard over there. Let's go ahead and get more magic power.
So be it. Only in a life will they see.
Alright, let's go ahead and get you guys over there. Looks like these Halberdiers have broken against my Hex Wraiths, or Cairn Wraiths. I need to get these guys built back up a bit, but I'm going to run our guy over here. Let's get Manfred over here. Let's wait until we've got the maximum number sort of units in this radius.
Witness true power.
And here you can see my numbers skyrocketing back up. These even these Blood Knights are sort of climbing back up into a good amount there. Alright, and they're gonna start running these guys over here. And that's a Pyrrhic victory, but I don't actually think that was that Pyrrhic. I still had quite a lot of units there. I did lose a whole unit of Graveguard with great weapons. Really good kills on them. Graveguard did fantastic number of kills as well. Oh, I guess it's because I lost all the zombies. So by pure numbers, yeah, I did lose a ton of troops. But, you know, it's zombies. Who cares about zombies? Managed to negate those Demigryph Knights with halberds. Got really good kills with the Blood Knights. Minor kills on the other ones, but they were up against Demigryph Knights with halberds. The assistance of those Cairn Wraiths was quite important there. Cairn Wraiths deal okay damage to units like Demigryph Knights. But the important thing is that they don't take damage back from them, and they basically take their attention off of my Blood Knights. So that combination is really good. The Skeleton Spearmen were also in there and doing a pretty good job of both distracting those Demigryph Knights with halberds and bogging them down, making it harder for them to retreat. This worked out very well. I think that this composition worked out a lot better than I thought it could have. Pretty interesting fight. Anyway, I hope you found this episode enjoyable, and of course, as always, I hope to see you all next time.